You're listening to Real Talk Texas with local expert Steve Hakes. Now, here's Steve.
Welcome back. This morning you're listening to Real Talk Texas on 570 KLIF News and Information. Your host, that's me, Steve Hakes. I'm joined by CEO and co-founder of the Real Estate Radio Network, Ron Quintero. Ron, before we went on break, we started talking a little bit about some of the things that Affiliated Bank offers as far as different loans beyond mortgages. And if you're a small business owner, we do have an SBA loan program that's available for you. We have a ton of money to lend. You might want to give me a call if you want to talk about small business loans. 214-643-6021. That's 214-643-6021. Okay, Ron, so we just were talking a little bit about my son who's starting to go out and look for real estate and consider buying his first home, and we were talking about how I highly recommend people that are putting very little down on their home that they go with a shorter term, a 15-year note or something like that, so that in 5 years down the road, they're really in a position where they've got some true equity in their home and they've got more of a down payment to step up into their next home as their family grows. And you were mentioning, and you felt that was a good strategy as far as from what I'm counseling our people.
Yeah, I've always considered the 15-year loan an equity builder loan, just because you so much accelerate the paying down of what's owed against the property. So your equity gap is increasing so much more rapidly on a 15-year note. And a lot of people don't really sit down. They'll look at payment, but they don't really calculate the numbers behind the numbers. They're not calculating what percentage of the payment is being applied towards the repayment of the loan, what's called the principal balance, and what part of a payment is basically interest that the bank is making a profit on. And it's important to know the numbers behind the numbers. So what I just heard you say, Steve, is that here you are, you're a mortgage lender. How long have you been in the business there in Texas?
I've been doing loans here in Texas for 14 years.
Okay, so what I just heard is you're giving your children the advice to buy now and to take advantage of tying up leverage, which is called a home loan, using leverage with the crazy low interest rates that we have right now. More importantly, I'm sure you've been reading all the stats regarding the affordability factor of how these low interest rates that, you know, what's bad for our economy right now, you know, we're having to try to repair our economy. And the way that the government's doing it is they're continuing to lower the rates, and how what's called the smart money, people that are stepping into that and taking advantage of that situation right now, and they're leveraging and borrowing so they can basically, you know, leverage is a hedge. They could build a bigger nest egg that much more rapidly. And it's amazing to me how many people are petrified by bad information from the evening news into doing nothing. And instead, right now, in my opinion, is the time to do something. It's the time to step up. After property values have come down in most marketplaces for the last 4 or 5 years, and rates have come down, the affordability factor of real estate, it's never been better. I've been in the business for 30 years, Steve, and I have never seen a better buying opportunity. Now, the bad news is I just read a statistic this past week that the average household income has come down from an average of $55,000 to now around $50,000, and we're actually at income levels for a household that's backed all the way to 1995. So, you know, it's a 17-year step back in the way of average household income. But if that's for average people. If you're listening to the show right now, and if you are on your career path to growth, to, you know, having future raises and so forth, this is a time right now for you to be able to lean into it and take advantage of what the general economy cannot take advantage of. And this is the time to lean into it with everything that you have.
If you just joined us, you're listening to Real Talk Texas on 570 KLIF. news and information radio, and we're listening to Ron Quintero of Real Estate Radio Network. And Ron, you make some great points there, but I was just thinking, I said, if we look back at when Dana and my wife and I started our mortgage business in 1999, and I remember we had our rates were in the low sevens, and we were doing great, and home prices were climbing and all those things. And I take a snapshot of that, and now I take it and I'll show my clients or I'll show my kids and say, okay, here's what your mortgage payment would have been at that time frame, okay, for this $150,000, $200,000 house. Now look at today's world and look at that same house, and you can actually get it for less per month on a 15-year note than you would have back in 1999 in the same house. So you're right. I mean, there's no better time to buy real estate than today. I mean, you really have to look at it. Don't just buy it on a 30-year note if you're not putting enough down. If you're putting 20% down, then yeah, I would consider doing a 30-year note. But for most people that are doing an FHA loan or they've got their minimum down payment, you got to really think about this. This is a prime opportunity to set yourself up for life by buying your real estate the right way.
Steve, I got a better one than that. The first home I sold back in 1982, we're talking 30 years ago, in San Diego. The buyer used the FHA loan that you keep referring to because that's what's really popular right now. Now, what was popular then? They went out and bought a $110,000 home in Southern California, which San Diego area. I mean, that was pretty low back then. But the bad news is their interest rate back then was 16.5% fixed rate, and they had to pay 5.5 points to get that loan because that was the environment back then. And for those of you that don't know how points work, a point is 1% of your loan amount. So if you're buying a home $110,000 with 3% down back then, it's 3.5 now, but 3% back then is about $3,300 down. So they had about a $107,000 loan. Their mortgage payment was through the roof. And so their cost to actually own that home at an interest rate of 16.5% versus, Steve, give me a range. Where are interest rates bouncing between right now?
You're anywhere between, well, let's talk about, here's an interesting thing. On a 30-year note, you're anywhere between 3.75 and 4.25 based on your credit scores and down payment and all those things. But realize this, if you look at a 15-year note, it's typically 1/4 to 1/2 point lower than the 30-year rate. So not only do you get the advantage of the shorter term, they're also helping you out with giving a lower rate during that time frame. So that really affects your principal and interest payment, your monthly payment.
And Steve, I want to comment on that because people need to understand the numbers behind the numbers. Why do they give a lower interest rate for a shorter-term loan? And the answer is because there's less risk with the bank. If the loan's not hanging out there for 30 years, if it's only going to be on the books for 15 years, they'll pass on some savings to you for taking on. Yeah. By the way, when you go from a 30-year mortgage to a 15-year mortgage, your payment does not double. There's this big, huge misperception that my payment's going to radically go up. It's going to go up. It's going to go up maybe 20 or 25%, but it's not a double. And when you sit down and you calculate the number of years of paying 30 years versus 15 years and the interest savings that you're going to experience as a result of going with the 15 versus a 30 and how much time it's going to save. Here in California, we have Southern California, we have a lot of retirees. And right now I see a lot of people making a huge mistake. They're going online without professional guidance, and they're refinancing their mortgage into a 30-year mortgage payment because of all the banner ads and the teases that they see out there. And I'm 53, Steve. I have no business getting a 30-year mortgage at age 53.
I'm right with you, brother.
You know what I mean? So, and I see a lot of these people doing this right now, and I'm like, why? I have a friend, he's 56 years old. I was speaking to him this week, and he says, yeah, Ron, I decided to refinance. Now, I'm not in the mortgage business. And I said, "Oh, you did?" He says, "Yeah, I just got a brand new 30-year mortgage." I said, "Why?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "How old do you plan to be when you retire?" He goes, "Well, I'm looking at retiring age 66, 68, right around there." And I said, "Well, don't you want to retire debt-free? Don't you want to retire without a mortgage obligation? Will you be able to retire without a mortgage obligation?" And there was absolute silence on the other end of the phone.
You got it. I mean, when you start talking to people that way, they really all of a sudden you get a pause because the light bulb starts to go off. And we only have about another minute in this segment here, Ron. But you hit the nail on the head, and I'm 53 as well. And so I look at my friends and the ones that want to refinance, and they call me and they want to talk to me about rate and fees and 30-year notes. And I immediately I'll give them the information they want, but then I also go that extra mile and start saying, okay, now let's think about where are you going to be when you're ready to retire? How does your whole portfolio, your finances look? Where are you at in your head for when you and your wife want to go off and sit on the beach sometime? When we come back, you're not going to want to miss this. We're going to just drill down a little deeper into what's going on in the real estate market here in Texas and what's happening when people start looking at refinancing and what are the best financial choices for you and your family.